Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of Inside the Naval Postgraduate School. From our campus here in Monterey, California, I'm your host Alan Richmond right here on the Pentagon Channel. Welcome to the show and let me be the first to wish you the happiest of holidays this season. Well, in this episode, we'll travel to the Arctic and check in on some research over the past couple of years conducted by NPS researchers. We'll have a visit with Vice Admiral William Moran and we'll tell you about breakfast for your brain. But to start things off, we're off to Pine Island Glacier. Tim, this is an interesting project you've been working on for quite some time. Tell us about the Pine Island Glacier project.
Well, it's a very ambitious field program to go all the way to this very remote glacier system, which is part of the Western Antarctic ice sheet. And it's the interface where the ice sheet flows out into the ocean and forms a 50-kilometer long ice shelf, and the idea was to go down there and confirm directly what the melt rates were underneath the ice shelf, because remote sensing, satellite remote sensing, had informed the glaciologists that the ice shelf melting was causing this increase in flow of the ice sheet system up on the continent. And a very remote site. It's 1,800 kilometers from McMurdo Station, where all the US staging is done. So it was a very complex project logistically. It took us, we started 7 years ago writing the proposal, and after 1 year of a recce down there, we realized we had to have a bigger support camp formed, helicopters and things to help us. And then subsequent seasons we did trials, equipment trials, and then a disastrous season 2 years ago where we went down and spent 2 months trying to get out there, but the helicopters never came out because of bad weather, and so we had to come back with virtually nothing. But then luckily this last and final funded season we got down there and pulled the whole thing off, which involved deploying 3 instrument systems down through this ice shelf at 3 different drill sites. And we're very pleased we were able to pull that off in about 6 weeks of work, 7 weeks total down on the ice.
Now this project has international implications, and we have a lot of international partners that have worked alongside NPS on this. Who are they and what roles do they play with us?
Yeah, the main one is the British Antarctic Survey, based in Cambridge in England, and they've had a very active program looking at the Western Antarctic for the same reasons that other glaciologists have. And they brought to the table a couple of really great observations. The year before, or 3 seasons ago, they went down with a very elaborate airborne radar that was able to map the underneath of the ice shelf and revealed that it wasn't just the smooth sheet at all that we had sort of thought it was, but it was filled with long river-like, inverted river-like channels. And it completely changed the dynamics of what we expect to see in the way that the ocean is interacting with the shelf. So we had that information in place, and they also, 2 years before that, had got a remote autonomous vehicle called AutoSub underneath the ice shelf and made some measurements both looking up and down at the seabed, again that guided the experiment design a lot. In fact, again, we had to modify the experiment to accommodate this new information. But it was very timely and a terrific collaboration, and they also sent one guy down to do these very precise measurements using a radar to look at local melt rates around the ice shelf while we were on the shelf.
Tim, you mentioned the logistics involved and all the equipment. It must be a tremendous amount, but also the instrumentation must be pretty incredible. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, didn't you invent a new piece of equipment as a result of this?
Well, yeah, we were highly constrained with the instruments that we could deploy because everything had to fit down a 20-centimeter hole drilled 500 meters through the ice. I mean, it's pretty preposterous. These are long, long boreholes that were drilled down using a very simple hot water drilling system that colleagues from the University of Fairbanks in Alaska brought with them. A very experienced young glaciologist did that, called Martin Trufer. And so I had to design everything that would fit well within that 20-centimeter diameter, and that eliminated a lot of the commercial solutions. So I ended up having to make custom instruments adapted from the ones that I've been using in the Arctic for the last decade and a half, So much of the instrumentation, the actual instruments, were from previous experiments, but again designed within our group here at NPS, but adapted to fit this very small footprint and the extreme depths and what you can imagine, the hassle of getting these very delicate instruments all the way down these long boreholes. Once they went down, you can't get them back. It's pretty nerve-wracking. It's a one-way trip. And after about 12 hours of them being underneath the ice shelf, the borehole closes up behind and they're forever inaccessible.
Now, I would suppose the obvious would be that weather is one of the hardest things to deal with, because that's a remote part of the world, to say the least, isn't it?
Yeah. Weather in all field work dominates, but in the Arctic and Antarctic, it really dominates. When we were first there in early December, we had several big windstorms, and that really slowed us down. We had to, as soon as the wind gets above a certain speed, like 40 or 50 knots, you get these massive snowdrifts. Even though it's almost a desert down there in terms of precipitation, there's enough snow on the surface that any bump will accumulate snow, like our sleeping tents, which are just little mountain tents, and our science tents, which were sort of called Arctic ovens that we worked in. But the equipment piles outside we'd have to dig out, and that really does slow you down. But luckily, after about 2 weeks of that calmed down, and we had very pleasant weather. In fact, by the time we came to move camps on the ice shelf, just hoofing everything on snowmobiles, 22,000 pounds of equipment, unfortunately it warmed up to the point where it was almost raining, if not raining, and that was actually the most miserable thing of all. You get wet and you're cold and you're tired and you're moving camp, and it happened the 2 times we moved camp, unfortunately. But other than that, we had pretty good conditions and nothing that really slowed us down, except for maybe a week or so at the beginning.
Now, NPS faculty and students have been involved with this. What's the connection? Why is NPS conducting this kind of research, and what relevance does it have for the Navy or the military in general?
Well, it's funded by the National Science Foundation, so it's not really Navy funded, but some parts of the similar research in the Arctic have been Navy funded, and a lot more recently. There's a great interest in the Navy in climate change issues, because they've realized the massive impact the Navy will feel with things like sea level rise. And the project down there is all about sea level rise. The huge amounts of ice held up on the continent in these ice sheets, as it becomes available to the ocean and melts through these ice shelves, leads directly to sea level rise. And so studying that and being able to predict that is a great concern to the Navy. So it was an easy sell for us to become involved in this. It extended the work I've been doing on sea ice in the Arctic. It's a very different problem up there. It doesn't lead to sea level rise. This one does. And certainly the MEDOC community that our students are involved with are very interested in sea level rise issues like this. And this is really cutting edge research, and it is very flattering to be invited into this group of sort of world leading researchers to study this problem.
What are some of the most important issues or the key issues that you've learned as a result of the study to date?
Well, the most important one, and the one that we just reported in a paper published in Science, was that the melt rates underneath the ice are just massive. It's like 2 to 3 inches a day, every day, on and on. We just report on the first 30 days of that data. We also report on the structure of that melt within these confined channels, and that's very important when we kind of model that and plug it into regional models, numerical models of that system, which will in the end give us more predictability. So that's the major outcome. It's consistent with some of the bulk satellite observations that have been based on altimetry, but it gives a lot more detail, and we're working right now on another paper that details the physics of the boundary layer that controls that melting process.
So from this point forward, what is the way ahead, and will NPS stay involved with our international partners?
Yeah, I think so. Even next year, we're working with British Antarctic Survey to retrieve some equipment, and as well as our US colleagues in the NAVCO program. And There's no immediate plan for another field campaign. This was extremely expensive by every standard. So we're going to chew a lot on this data and work with the modelling community on the results for the next year or two, but I'm quite sure we'll be measuring underneath ice shelves at some time in the near future.
Well, you always do very interesting work, and it's important work, and congratulations on completing this study, although there's still more to learn, isn't there?
Yep, there's always more to learn.
Well, special thanks to Dr. Tim Stanton and his researchers here at NPS for an interesting study. Well, stay with us. There's more to come right here on Inside NPS on the Pentagon Channel. Welcome back to the show. Well, recently we had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting with Vice Admiral William Moran. Vice Admiral William Moran, a native of New York, graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree from the United States Naval Academy in 1981 and a master's degree from the National War College in 2006. He assumed duties as the Navy's 57th Chief of Naval Personnel, August 2, 2013. Serving concurrently as the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Manpower, Personnel Training and Education, N1. He's responsible for the planning and programming of all manpower, personnel, training, and education resources for the U.S. Navy. He manages an annual operating budget of $29 billion and leads more than 26,000 employees engaged in recruiting, personnel management, training, and development of Navy personnel. His responsibilities include overseeing Navy Recruiting Command, Navy Personnel Command, and the Naval Education and Training Command. Well, Admiral, thank you very much for taking time to appear with us here on Inside NPS. Let's talk a little bit about the reason for your visit. Why are you here at NPS?
I'm new in the Chief of Naval Personnel role, so I, as the owner of all things manpower, personnel, training, and education, we have a role to play with all of our educational institutions, to include NPS. So I'm out here to visit the new president, retired Vice Admiral Ron Rout, talk about several issues with him, everything from resources to curriculum, and to see where we can take the institution in the future.
Wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your viewpoint on why NPS is so relevant to the Navy.
I think the value of having an institution that's directly linked to the Navy, Navy Postgraduate School, is that we have the ability to send high quality individuals, officer and enlisted, to this school where they are working on real issues that affect our Navy today and in the future. They get to share ideas with the joint audience. There are officers from across all the services here, international students, and I think being able to compare notes, to compare ideas, and to compare solutions to real problems is a huge benefit to this school and the institution.
In your opinion, what's the value of graduate education?
On a personal level, I was late to getting graduate education. It took me over 26 years to finally get back to school. And it's a real challenge for most warfighters to get to a master's level program. But what I learned very late in the game was the value of going back to an education environment, to an institution where you're free to challenge concepts, you're free to challenge ideas, is the art of learning how to think critically. And I think any master's degree program, any postgraduate education program is going to instill the notion for any student that the real value of this education process is to think critically about problems and to challenge assumptions and to challenge ideas and potentially, hopefully, come up with much better solutions than we currently have.
Sir, tell us a little about some of the challenges you face with the manning and the manpower issues along with the budget cuts.
Yeah, so we are clearly in a challenging fiscal environment, and those have direct impacts on manning and manpower. And I think the biggest issue we have going forward is how do we retain high quality sailors when there may be a perception that the organization, the Navy in particular, may be coming down in size. I think we're all going to have to live with those fiscal realities. But my job is to make sure that we recruit and we retain the best people we can do. And that is going to be a challenge. But I think we got the right processes in place and the right people looking at the problems. And those are problems that are being addressed here at NPS that those students are helping us with. So I think when you combine the intellectual capacity and capability of an institution like NPS with what we're trying to do back at headquarters, there's huge value in coming out here. There's huge value in understanding different ways of looking at problems that are facing us in this environment.
Well, I know that you've been traveling quite a bit. Talk overall about the purpose of your trip.
This wraps up what I would consider my trip around fleet concentration areas, having come into the job just 3 months ago. We started with a visit to a recruiting command in Ohio, went to Great Lakes and visited RTC and the A schools associated with our Great Lakes. And then we went to Norfolk and visited 3 ships and several units on the waterfront, but hadn't been to the West Coast. So we circled back here to the West Coast as kind of our, for me, my last education on key areas. I had not been to Bangor before, so we started in Bangor and visited a couple submarines up there. Went to the Stennis the next day and saw a ship that had been run real hard operationally for the last couple of years, talked to the crew about their challenges and what they see as their future, and then visiting NPS for the reasons we described earlier. But tomorrow or this afternoon we head off to San Diego. I'm going to visit some ships on the waterfront in San Diego and several of the enabling capabilities that are resident in the San Diego area. So we're really looking forward to kind of closing out the fleet concentration learning experience for me and take those back to inform how we look at policies in the future.
Well, we certainly appreciate the time we had to spend with Vice Admiral William Moran and his great service to the Navy and to the country. Well, listen, if you'd like to find out more about the Naval Postgraduate School, here's how. You know, you can get the latest news and information on the Naval Postgraduate School as it happens through the university's official Twitter site. Follow NPS and stay connected and stay informed at twitter.com/NPS Monterey. Well, the Monterey chapter of the National Naval Officers Association has a great program to help young kids stay in school. It's called Breakfast for Your Brain. And with more on that, here's our own Natalie Stamey.
The mission of the Naval Postgraduate School is to provide relevant advanced education and research programs to increase the combat effectiveness of commissioned officers and enhance the security of the United States. This mission has driven developments in cutting-edge technologies, advancements in autonomous systems, and even launched a CUBE satellite into space. And while these accomplishments are all equally impressive, there are still smaller, yet just as impacting efforts taking place on campus each and every day. One such initiative is student-led, and it has life-changing results for its recipients. And it all begins right here at the Dudley Knox Library.
They just said, there will be tutoring at the Dudley Knox Library at NPS. Breakfast for Your Brain, they call it. So, yeah.
And it was started just to give back to the community, helping young men and women finish high school or have tutoring in some classes that they were having problems with.
Each Saturday morning for 2 hours, military students from the Naval Postgraduate School and the Defense Language Institute converge on the NPS Library to offer their specialized knowledge to local students seeking to improve their academic performance.
Any given week you come in and you could teach physics, chemistry, calculus, history. So you'd be working with a high school senior on calculus, and then the next week you come in and you have a 4th grader who wants your help with reading.
Spearheaded by the Monterey chapter of the National Naval Officers Association, Breakfast for Your Brain has been a weekly tradition at Dudley Knox since 1999. In that time, the various subjects shift according to the needs of the students seeking assistance. But what has remained constant is the demand for specialized tutoring in advanced math and science, subjects that many of the military students are uniquely qualified to tutor.
Not every parent can help their kid with those subjects, and paying for 2 hours of tutoring a week for that would probably be prohibitive for some. But it's not like the kids don't value the help and the extra attention.
I can bring in AP World History and it'll be fine, or biology or chemistry or whatever. I think it's really great because, there's not many other free tutoring sessions around, and so it's really nice to just be able to walk in and, they'll help you with whatever you need.
They have a great opportunity right now. Naval Postgraduate School is a great educational institution, and we have a lot of smart men and women here, and a lot of them we just want to give back.
In addition to breaking down tough subjects for better comprehension, the Breakfast for Your Brain tutors also want to break down the stigmas that come along with seeking help.
Doesn't mean you're weak, doesn't mean you're a nerd. You just need to I guess, see yourself and seek self-improvement.
As word gets out and people see benefit and go back to their schools, then others will come.
During the course of a session, the lessons can often go beyond the books and reach into the personal lives of the students. What first began as a program to encourage high schoolers to consider college has now blossomed into a mission of mentoring young adults.
A lot of these kids, they don't have any mentors, or they're looking at rap music, football players, baseball players to try to get their mentorship. And we feel you can't get mentorship from a TV screen. You can't get mentorship listening to music. You have to have that one-on-one.
That is where tutors and mentors like Captain Gonzalez step in.
We get to know you, talk to you a little bit, find out how you're doing, what you're struggling and why you think you're struggling it. Trying to make a one-on-one connection with these young men and women, so that way not only do we help them in their subject, but we're also opening the door so they can talk to us.
It's a partnership that requires both tutor and student, mentor and mentee, to commit themselves to the best they can bring to the table. The rewards may seem modest, but for those witnessing the academic victories taking place on a Saturday morning, the benefits are priceless.
You watch them wrestle with the problem, and they often will look to you very quickly for help, and you just say, well, I think you can do it, and help, well, yeah, let's work through it together, and you kind of help them through the process, and all of a sudden there's like that, yes, okay, I get it, and then you give them the next problem, and then they fly through it. And that at least for me, is a rewarding aspect, is like watching the learning, the mastery kind of take place.
We'd like to thank the dedicated men and women of the Breakfast for Your Brain program for donating their time and expertise to local students and the Monterey community. If you would like to get involved, you can learn more by contacting the Dudley Knox Library or visiting nps.edu/library. For Inside NPS, here on the Pentagon Channel, I'm Natalie Stamey.
Well, of course, NPS is involved in a lot of outreach, particularly with school-age children from kindergarten through 12th grade, and that's the STEM program. Maybe you can give us an overview about that.
Sure. Well, I think one of the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math are increasingly important disciplines that we see for our kids these days. And so ranging from kindergarten through 12th grade, even beyond through college and graduate programs, we offer everything from mentored internships throughout the summers, as well as opportunities for students to come and participate in a variety of projects working with talented NPS faculty.
Talk a little bit about the kinds of projects that you have them work on, because this is really hands-on, isn't it?
The nice thing about our program is robotics is definitely capturing the minds of many of the kids that are out there, so they love to work on hands-on projects. So the types of projects that we have our students working on in the Arsenal group here at NPS include things like working on ground robots and getting them to navigate autonomously and avoid obstacles, or working on autonomous flying vehicles that we're going to be testing here at GIFIX to be able to learn how autonomous robots need to do flight by themselves. So quite a large variety, including surface boats driving around by themselves and maybe eventually underwater as well.
And the Navy is really solidly behind this for research and development. I mean, there are a lot of departments that support this program, aren't there?
Absolutely. I think one of the great benefactors has been the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research and Development Acquisition, ASN RDNA, and the Chief Systems Engineer of the Navy, also active supporter of STEM outreach throughout these types of efforts.
Where do these kids come from? All over Monterey County?
Many of these students come not only from the local areas, from the local high schools, but also across the nation. There are Navy Research Enterprise internship programs that ONR, the Office of Naval Research, helps host, and that really pull students from all over the country. They can apply from a variety of places to a variety of Navy labs, and some of them select Naval Postgraduate School for the types of resources we have.
And I suppose the long-term goal is really to get kids at a young age interested in those fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, who hopefully will later go into government service or into technology to help move it even further.
Absolutely. I think the earlier that we can convince students that this is an interesting field, that it is something that's going to pique their interests over the long term, and then ultimately bring those into DoD and the Navy would be phenomenal, so we can develop and foster that type of talent in-house.
And we've had some great success stories with kids involved in this program who have gone on to actually do some really fabulous things in the field.
Absolutely. I'm really proud of some of our interns that have come and seen what robotics is about and decided to, as a high school student, seen that material and decided to go into these disciplines for graduate school, or vice versa for undergraduate, that is, and go into these types of majors. Or our undergraduate students come in, really develop and hone a sense of research and want to pursue that in graduate level education after these types of internships.
Great. Well, congratulations, Tim. It's a great program. You do a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, that's it for this edition of Inside NPS. As we close our show, we'd certainly like to thank all of you for your service to our military and to our country, and wish you the happiest of holidays this season. Be safe, and we all wish you a safe journey home. That's it for this edition of Inside NPS. I'm Alan Richmond. We'll see you again next time.